Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. And thank you for joining us for this webinar on skilling, reskilling, and upskilling, bridging the manufacturing workforce gender gap. Over the last 45 years, ICRW has worked to advance gender equity, social inclusion, and shared prosperity. We generate research, evidence to understand the causes, forms, and redress mechanisms that can be applied at policy, institutional, community, and individual levels. This is the first of a two-part webinar series on skilling and is derived from the findings of the first study of its kind in its region, which focused on the status of women in manufacturing in Kenya. The study was undertaken by ICRW and launched in 2020. It revealed that a lack of appropriate skill sets is a leading contributor to women's low participation in manufacturing. As we know, manufacturing is a huge driver of economic growth, but the employment of women in this sector remains very low. Currently, only about 17% of Kenya's manufacturing sector workforce are actually women. And women are underrepresented in STEM programs, which are critical for entry into the manufacturing sector. And this is why today's conversation is very important. Advanced technological approaches to production are going to be the future of work. Are women ready for this? So targeted skilling, reskilling, and upskilling has the potential to accelerate gender diversity and inclusion in the manufacturing sector. This webinar on skilling, reskilling, and upskilling gives us a forum to discuss the status of women's technical skills required for Kenya's manufacturing sector, the barriers that hinder women from attaining these technical skills, and the opportunities for bridging gender gaps in manufacturing skill sets. I also hope that this webinar will begin to provide us with some policy and practice actions that can cultivate a skilled and gender inclusive workforce in manufacturing. My name is Cleopatra Mugyenyi. I am the Director for ICRW Africa, and I welcome you all and look forward to your participation in this webinar. Before we get started, I would like to just take us through some quick housekeeping rules, and the slide should be up in front of you. All participants are currently muted and the chat box is open. And questions can be shared via the QA box anytime during the session. And these will be used, your questions will be posed to the panelists during the session. And please note that this session is being recorded. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Our presenter, who is going to be presenting some data on this study, is actually called Sarah Nduta Njenga, and she is a gender specialist at ICRW. She has been working in gender, mainstreaming and inclusion, women's economic empowerment, health system strengthening, research, data, monitoring, evaluation, and advocacy for over 10 years. And she will be presenting some of the results out of the Women in Manufacturing study, especially focused on skilling and reskilling. Our other panelists, our expert panelists are Ms. Hannah Muthoni Kiarie, who is the Deputy Director for Industries in the State Department of Industrialization. She has worked in Kenya's Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development for over 22 years and has served in various technical capacities. She's currently the Deputy Director of Industries in the Directorate of Research, Manufacturing and Industrialization Policy at the State Department of Industrialization. Mr. Fred Oanda is the Deputy Director, Accreditation Services at the Technical and Vocational Education and Training Authority, TVETA. His roles span oversight of accreditation of training providers, trainers, assessors, and verifiers, and the approval of competency-based education and training curriculum and overall quality assurance. And prior to joining TVETA, he served as the Deputy Director for Industries at the Directorate of Engineering and Construction in the State Department of Industrialization. Ms. Mary Ngechu is the Managing Director of Plast Group of Companies, as well as Chair of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers Women in Manufacturing Program. She has been working in this industry for a long time, and as managing director of Plast Group, they provide it's a packaging company that provides solutions that serve a wide range of clients, including the food and beverage industry, cosmetics, agrovet, and pharmaceuticals all across East Africa. And Mary is a social entrepreneur, development, and decent jobs in the Kenyan manufacturing sector. Engineer Grace Onyango is the Director of Capacity Building and Accreditation at the Engineers Board of Kenya. And she is in charge of capacity building and accreditation. And this mandate of the Engineering Board of Kenya spans the regulation of engineering, education, training, and practice. She holds a Bachelor of Sciences in Engineering in Electrical and Electronics with honors from Northumbria University, and has over 16 years of experience in the built environment. And this experience spans all across employment in government, as well as employment working with companies in the private sector. Mr. Crispin Afifu is a gender specialist who works with us at ICRW, and he has over 13 years of hands-on experience in gender mainstreaming, project planning, and management, with an emphasis on program development, results-based management, outcome mapping, logical, and results frameworks. And he too worked with Ms. Nduta Njenga on this Kenya Women in Manufacturing project. So I welcome you all, and we'll get started with a brief presentation by Nduta on the study findings, especially around this area of skilling and reskilling. Over to you, Nduta.
Thank you very much, Cleopatra. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today in this very important webinar discussion on skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. I will briefly take us through a subset of findings that speak to the skilling issues from the Women in Manufacturing study that we undertook in 2020. Next slide, please. Just to quickly mention that the Women in Manufacturing study sought to understand the status and the context of women's participation in manufacturing as business owners, as leaders within the industry, as employees. The issue of skill set gaps among women came out strongly as a key barrier to women's participation, to their competitiveness, and to their growth within the industry, and was cited as one of the reasons why the sector remains largely male-dominated. We note that manufacturing is a huge driver of economic growth across the globe, and is one of the pillars in Kenya's the Big Four agenda, which is the current government's blueprint for economic development, which includes the creation of jobs. But importantly, the employment of women within the sector remains a bit low. As we can see within this graph, the manufacturing sector is male-dominated in terms of the formal employment, with over 80% of men representation. As we can see, women are lagging behind, and growth within the sector translated into only a 1% increase from 16% to 17% in women's formal employment for the period 2018 to 2019. Now, these are recent statistics from the 2020 Kenya Economic Survey, and so it is likely that we are still within the same situation. As we know, women make up more than half of Kenya's population, and so this low participation of half of Kenya's population in a key sector such as the manufacturing not only impacts the lives of the women, but also affects the ability of the country to achieve its developmental goals and potential. So what is the current status of women's skill sets, technical skill sets, and where does that leave them in terms of employment and in terms of participation within the industry? Women constitute only 17% of the total workforce within the sector. Factors such as the policy environment, the social status, the economic issues contributing significantly to these low numbers. And what we see is that when women are fewer within the industry, when they are more underrepresented, it tends to reinforce negative social and cultural norms that perhaps they do not fit in, and probably that this should be an industry that is preserved for men. For example, because of the patriarchy issues and our attachment to culture, girls are more often than not socialized that their place is within the home. So they're made to concentrate on homemaking, on cooking, and such related duties. Secondly, girls' entry into certain courses, such as industrial courses, such as the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and even ICT. It's hampered by the cultural misconceptions that there are certain jobs that are acceptable for women, or even maybe girls probably excel better in certain courses, for example, the languages, the social sciences. So sciences have not really been taken as a subject that girls should be getting into. So where does that leave the girls and the women at the workplace in terms of their ability to choose the technical jobs and even for the roles that they take up within the industry? A key finding from the Women in Manufacturing study is also that women, because they do not have the competitive skills or they lack certain technical skill sets, they end up taking the very lower level jobs. And of course, this comes, the lower level jobs comes with lower pay and even few opportunities for career growth and development. Skills mismatch, it's a prevalent problem where at times the education and the training does not provide the skills that are needed in the labor market, or at times the economy does not create jobs that correspond to the existing skills. In our study, we found that some of the women entrepreneurs who had to source skills from abroad in certain instances, when it comes to operating certain machinery, because the skill sets were lacking in country. So here then the question then becomes, how do we ensure that existing technical training can be mapped to the market, to the sector demands, so that we can be able to reduce the gap between the skill set acquisition and even job placement and acquisition. As we all know, we are within the era of the Industrial Revolution, and the future of work is in automation and in digitalization of work. Of course, this means that women can now take up previously male-dominated jobs, which will be automated. But for this, they will definitely need to skill, to reskill, and to upskill to be able to be competitive and to be productive within the industry. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, in our study, we looked at women's participation from a system point of view, and we looked at it from an ecological model to understand the factors that impact of women's skill set. We identified 3 layers which can be used to describe women in the manufacturing sector. The inside layer, which we are calling the micro level, consists of individual and societal factors. The mid layer, which is the meso level, consists of business or organizational related factors, while the outer layer is composed of policy related factors. In our analysis, we found that the factors across these 3 layers contribute as either challenges or as opportunities to obtain requisite skill sets among women, as you can see within the diagram on this slide. And as you can see, we have as many opportunities as we have the challenges. So if I could take an example of the interpersonal and the social issues, issues such as women's triple gender roles, which focuses on the roles that women are likely to play within the household, and at the workplace and at the community level. Of course, this affects women's ability to attain technical skills because women have to juggle on the many different roles they play within the society. So as an opportunity, we can have the training programs that are cognizant of the time barriers and the women juggling between different things. And then we are able to offer flexible training formats or have provisions for childcare solutions where a woman can maybe bring their young child to the site and there is someone to look after the baby as she trains. And perhaps this would be a game changer that can allow women to maximize on training opportunities within the workplace and even beyond. Again, one of the barriers that the study revealed was the social cultural issues that dictate which courses boys and girls should uptake. And for this, I see an opportunity for us to develop mechanisms by which we can have these negative cues unlearned, so that then girls and boys can both be placed at an equal place in terms of opportunity. At the business and organizational level, if we can be able to develop apprenticeship models and mentorship initiatives that can allow women with experience in manufacturing to be able to mentor others, other young girls and young women, and motivate, could help to motivate more women to enroll in technical courses that can prepare them to compete within the industry. At policy level, the enrollment and retention of girls in STEM related in STEM courses, of course, remains low. And of course, this presents us with an opportunity to invest in strategies for targeted enrollment and targeted retention, for example, by having affirmative action where girls enrollment must reach a certain proportion within the different levels of education. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so as I conclude, and as we continue to talk about the place and the space of women, I want us to deliberate on what would happen if we were able to address women's technical skill sets. What would be the return on investment for gender inclusion and diversity at the workplace? And when we are thinking about this and looking at a woman holistically. Findings from a research done by the International Labour Organization, that is ILO, in 2019, indicated that the enterprises with equal employment opportunities for policies and for gender inclusive cultures are almost 60% more likely to have improved profits, improved productivity, and they're almost 60% more likely to experience enhanced, better reputation, and even are able to attract and retain talent and embrace creativity and innovation. Now, this is a very serious business imperative for us to think about as we discuss matters gender equality and matters skill set development for women in manufacturing. With that, I bring it to a close. Thank you once again, and over to you, Cleo.
Thank you, Ndita, for that presentation. So as we can all see, there is a greater need for skill set development to enable women not only to enter, but to progress within the manufacturing sector. So here we have our expert panelists who I will be asking some questions. And for Hannah, Fred, Grace, Mary, if you can all turn on your cameras if they're not turned on, sorry, and as well as Crispin, I'll go into the question, the panel discussion. So let's start with you, Hannah. So what are you seeing as the key policy and regulatory gaps that have hindered women's acquisition of technical skills that are needed for their full participation in non-traditional sectors such as manufacturing? Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Thank you for joining the webinar. So thank you, as you've heard, my name is Hannah Muthoni Kiarie, working for the State Department for Industrialization in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Enterprise Development. So going to your question, the key policy and regulatory gaps, if I can start maybe by highlighting some of the policies and also the procedures, how we do our policies. And when you're doing policy, we start from the top. Maybe we start from the SDGs, that is the Sustainable Development Goals. And we look at the SDGs which are related to manufacturing, like Goal 9, Goal 9, which is the industry, innovation and infrastructure. You also have Goal 8 of SDGs, which is decent work and economic growth. And there's Goal 17 also, which talks about partnerships for the goals. So we bring it down to Kenya and look at the Vision 2030, and where we are looking at making Kenya into a middle income industrialized country by the year 2030, God willing. And we are still on course. We are still working towards that. So from there, then we come down to our policies, like we have the national industrialization framework, the industrialization policy framework for Kenya. This is the sessional paper number 9 of 2012, and where we have enumerated various policy issues regarding various sectors of industrialization. Starting all the way, we classify them from different sectors, from agro-processing, chemical and minerals. We talk about engineering and construction, and even those ones which are very high risk, like biotechnology and nanotechnology. They are all enumerated in that policy. We also have another policy called Buy Kenya, Build Kenya policy. This one, we developed it to help consumers to uptake products made by Kenyans. And we also have another policy on micro and small enterprises. This was recently developed in the year 2019-2020, where we are looking at facilitating the SMEs so that they can take part in manufacturing. So when we look at all these, we see that we do stakeholder forums. So they are very participatory. When we are doing the policies, they are very participatory. But now I was looking at it with an angle lens, because maybe I am not coming from the sector of gender. Sometimes our lens may look at it like we are blind. Let's say we look at it as like it will fit for all. It will fit for male and female. So maybe that is a gap, such that we need to dig deeper and try to see how, as we make those policies, how do we ensure that the girl child is able to penetrate? Because we know there's some problems which, you know, with manufacturing, it is finance intensive. You need a lot of finances, and also capital intensive. And also we know, even to get bank loans, there are things you need, like you need title deed, and also you need property, which some women are not having these things.
Yeah.
So sometimes
thank you.
setting up this. Yes.
Yeah.
Should I go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Hannah. I think you've touched on a number of things, because you've mentioned a wide range of policy and regulatory frameworks that are in existence, but you've essentially said they tend to be gender blind. And I think that is a key point that we need to sort of take across this discussion. And I'll be coming back to you on a bit more of that, Hannah. But now to Fred, but knowing that we have these policies that are gender blind, and we know that also in Kenya, only 17% of the total workforce, manufacturing workforce, is made up of women. From your experience at Tibeta, what is the industrial course uptake for women in general? And what factors affect, you know, this relevant skill set development for women who are actually taking up these training programs? Over to you, Fred.
Thank you, Cleopatra. Good evening, good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this discussion. Just to go straight to your question, and so that I can respond, is that if you look at our TVET institutions, of course, when we as a regulator, when we go in, we're also interested in terms of enrollments. And these enrollments, we are also interested in terms of the gender, male and the female, both in the STEM programs. And it's that when we look at it from 2014 up to 2019, you get that the female are at 3% in STEM programs, while men are 67%. When you go further, you look at the trainers, those are the teachers themselves, it is the same percentage. You find that female are at 3% in STEM programs, while male are 67%. So you ask yourself, what is the root cause of this? And this one, we go back to basic education. You find that mostly in primary and secondary, the issue of the emphasis on STEM subjects, those are the, particularly in secondary, maths, physics, chemistry, biology, you see that the performance at Form 4 for these science subjects, it is low. Okay, not only that, because it might be low in both sexes, but the issue could be that when it comes to selection of programs for uptake in TVET, because they are admitted through the joint, that is the Kenya Universities and Colleges Central Placement Service, maybe fewer women may choose those STEM programs, probably because of the attitude. It could be also because of there was no career guidance or advocacy for women to take up these programs. Now, to come to the issue of the skill sets, why there isn't that, you find that one is that the issue of linkage with industry for the TVET programs, it is very low. Probably is that the industry may not know what benefits they may get from them being involved in the training aspects. For example, they allow our students to practice maybe for 3 months in the industry. The other point is that probably we don't have adequate training or the most current technological training facilities within our institutions. So we look forward to bridging that gap, and the government has made that effort towards that direction. So I could quickly say that the reasons why maybe there is that no relevant skill set is we need to involve industry in the curriculum design and development, because they are the ones who tell us what is it that they need, what kind of skills. And then from the occupational standards, we do develop the curriculum, which will inform the learning outcomes that will lead into these trainees fitting into the requirements of the industry. And one aspect, if I can quickly tell you what the government has done is, for example, we have taken 3 training institutions where we are now practicing or trying to model dual training. In dual training, we are saying that the trainees will be 3 months in the institution and 3 months in the industry. And part of these institutions which lead to manufacturing are like Kenya, Kiambu Institute of Science and Technology, where we are doing now industrial mechatronics. We are also talking of Nairobi Technical Training Institute, where we are doing automotive mechatronics. And we are talking of Tika Technical Training Institute, where we are piloting what we call the auto body technology, where they are doing very closely with Kenya vehicle manufacturers in Thika, while these others are associating with Coca-Cola, and they are also associating with other companies that will lead into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred. So you've touched on something that I think we'll also come back to, the requirement of industry actually playing a role in training. And it's great to hear about these partnerships between our training institutions and industry players that can improve this. And I think we will be touching on that again. But my next question, and taking on from that flow, where we've talked about this regulatory framework that tends to be gender blind, training programs that maybe may not be giving us or may not be producing graduates with the particular skill set that industries may or may not need. I'd like to ask you, Mary, as a woman who has been working in manufacturing, and also in your role as the chair of the Women in Manufacturing program at Kenya Association of Manufacturers, to what extent has this lack of maybe access to training, the lack of skills, as well as this regulatory framework that is gender blind, how has this affected women's entry and retention and growth in Kenya's manufacturing sector? And I know for you, you can really speak from experience. So over to you, Mary.
So thank you, Cleopatra. Going straight to your question, as a woman in manufacturing, I would say first is to understand that any manufacturing industry requires competitiveness, we require productivity, product quality, responsive to the customer needs, and process flexibility. And historically, I would say that our women did not go to college. They were not trained on these skills. And most women who are in the industry now lack these skills. The revolution of industry now requires that we have more automated industries. We have more machines that require skills that have been trained. So in terms of entry level, then we find that we have women who've gotten into the industry without these skills, and that way then they are not able to grow themselves because they lack these skills. In retention, what I would say is that as women, what we need to do is to look for opportunity to skill ourselves. These days, there's a lot of online training that we can do for ourselves, not only for machine operations, but also for the growth of our businesses. There's finance management, there's people management, and these are all things that are required in the industry for the business owners if you have to run the operations. And these days, we have a lot of virtual learning, and we also have a lot of free self-paced learning that can be done. In technical skills, we have a lot of on-job trainings that we can be able to do. We can be able to skill our existing women who are already working for us. Like this is one of the things that I do. I do what they call the indentured apprenticeship. This is training specific for specific machineries that I'm learning in my organization. And we train women so that they're able to operate our machine. That way, we achieve retention for them, and we also are able to achieve growth for our organization. There are also many other institutions like the Kenya Association of Manufacturers that has a lot of trainings specific for industry. And having knowledge of many different industry, then they've been able to compile technical trainings that we are able to train our women who are in business of the skills that they did not learn there before. Also for the women who have taken the STEM sciences, when they come to the industry, they get a lot of mismatch because of what the industry level that we have today. Most of the industries that we have are having old technology, they have old machinery, and the schools in STEMs now, when they train with the newer technology, newer skills of today, digitalizations, then they come to the industry and they find that most industries are not digitalized. So it is important, as the area person speaker Fred has said, there's a tandem collaboration between the curriculum and the industry where we are. So as the industries grow, we go growing our women with the skills that are required as at that particular time. So there's also the stereotype that we've talked about, that women, we never embraced the manufacturing. So we need to remove this so that we can be able to embrace the opportunities that are there and propel ourselves for growth.
Thank you, Mary. I think, yes, there seems to be that flow where we're beginning to talk about, and you're mentioning, just like Fred did, whether the training actually matches the requirements that we're seeing in the industry. And there's this very quick shift in picking up new innovations. And my question to Engineer Grace is really going to move towards that. As we move into this fourth industrial revolution, as Kenya and the rest of the region tries to catch up with the more developed economies when it comes to manufacturing. And as your role as an engineer and a specialist in capacity building, we've already heard that there's this gap that the training institutions have. Mary, speaking from an industry perspective, is also saying that there is a gap. Do you think our institutions are actually doing enough to address these skill set needs, and what can they do? So over to you, Grace.
Thank you very much, Cleopatra. I think the way we design our curricula is there's a lot of theory on it. So with the theory, you're not able to get the students to be able to get the skill set that is required. But also because there is something that Fred mentioned that's very, very important. There is that industry-academia linkage, which is extremely weak, because industry is the one that creates the demand for the institutions to do the supply. And so if there's a mismatch between what the demand wants, then the supply that is coming will not be able to plug in into what is happening in that space. And so what we are seeing, especially in the STEM, STEM, I call it STEM because there is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but there's also manufacturing and production. And so the skill set that is required for that specific people group, whether you're a man or a woman, is very, very specific. But because we're talking about manufacturing today, so I'll just start by just briefly talking about the skill set. I'll just enumerate them very quickly. One is digital fluency. And as Mary has said, you know, everything is moving automation. And so if you're not digitally fluent, then whether you're a man or a woman, you're not able to plug into what is happening on the space. And so it requires a lot of skilling, reskilling, and upskilling, because even if you're skilled in digital fluency, you're required to be able to get to know, because this coding and programming languages are changing every other day. There's new technology. I'm sure Mary has got latest technology in her manufacturing, in her factories, but she needs to make sure that it is what is the latest in the market. The other one is big data analytics. And so as women, we find that we shy away from a lot of these things that are technology looking. We think they're too hard and all that, but you must develop that skill set if you're going to be able to plug in. And that's a conversation that it's a hard conversation that women mentors and role models need to have. But the other one also is the soft skills, you know, leadership, critical thinking, interpersonal relationship building, ability to manage others. We find that in our institutions, these things are not being taught. And that is why the Engineers Board of Kenya, we are moving to a different modeling type. We are calling it outcomes-based education. And there, we're not only looking at the theory that goes into that person, but at the end of that program and 5 years, 3 to 5 years post graduating from that program, what is that student able to do? How are they able to do it? Are they able to achieve it? But the other thing that we're also finding is that there are very, as Fred has said, very few women are enrolling into these programs. We do register engineers in our entire register. Women are less than 10% of engineers in Kenya, and that even covers the engineers who are into manufacturing and production. And so one of the things that we are seeing in the faculty, the teaching faculties of these technical programs, they're male dominated. And so when you look at the young ladies within the young ladies within who are taking up those programs, you know, when you already see first of all, your class, you are probably 1 in 50. Then the entire faculty, the entire teaching faculty, most of them are men. So who is your role model? Who do you look up to? The linkage with industry is again weak. And so how do you get to see the women role models who are in manufacturing to give you that hope and to give you that encouragement that yes, it can be done? Because with that linkage and bringing in that, like, for example, when I listen to Mary, I feel very inspired. And someone like her can create a very memorable learning experience if, for example, institutions embrace industry and they have mentorship programs, because again, that one is lacking a little bit. And so if you bring somebody like Mary in and they're able to hear her speak and hear her challenges, her achievements, what she's doing with ladies, and she doesn't necessarily have to come from the STEM field. It's good to have the ones from the STEM field, but someone who has achieved what Mary has achieved, it totally shifts the mindset of the young ladies who go through the experiences. So we're trying to see how can the learning be memorable for these young people. And so it just brings them a more authentic feel to what they are doing and prepare them properly for industry. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Grace. So I like this. Having role models becomes very important. And it's very sad to hear that only 10% of the engineers that you actually have accredited within your database are women. We have a long way to go. So Crispin, now, as a gender expert and hearing what we have heard from all the other panelists, it's clear that without the right skills, women are unable to negotiate these, to not only negotiate, but be able to attain these higher cadre jobs and roles, which will probably have better remuneration, security, and social protection. So what do you see as the opportunities here, especially in light of all the insights that our panelists have given us in this first round of questions? Over to you, Crispin.
Thank you so much, Cleo. Thank you so much, fellow panelists and the participants. This discussion, and I'm sure the way it is flowing, it's already, to me, I'm seeing a couple of opportunities. Number one, I would want to say that we have to, especially coming from the background of Mr. Fred, who is in the regulation, one of the opportunities I look at is that how can we not just regulate the way regulation is and is known, to enabling, so that then we are intentionally enabling and creating opportunities within that spectrum to be able to attract the female students, for example, into enrolling and having that motivation and the encouragement to want to partake and to participate in manufacturing in general. But also, when I draw from the clustering of the manufacturing in Kenya sector by the Kenyanization manufacturers, it's a wide field, from building, mining, construction, paper, leather, textile, automotive, pharmaceuticals, that it's so wide that, number one, we would want to get to a point whereby as stakeholders, we can be able to establish sort of what I can call a measurement matrix in order to be able to demonstrate a clear proposition of the value of attracting the female workforce at different cadres, from the lowest all the way up, developing one for Kenya, whereby then even the industry players like Mary could actually say and demonstrate that by having this many female, not just female, but female who are qualified in these different cadres, then this is what I'm able to get in terms of return on investment and equity as an industry. I would also want to add that it's time we go to a point whereby we can do and reverse all the gaps and challenges that have been identified by various studies, but most importantly, that which came out of the women's study, in which case then it means that as stakeholders, we see an opportunity in terms of intentionally and deliberately making smart investments in skill set development program, in which case it calls us to be able to critically evaluate, like Hannah said earlier, that when they come up with, for example, policies, they are looking for what fits all. But now, as we continue, we know nothing fits all. The needs of men and women are different. And so for that reason, smart investment would help us not just to generalize our programming, but be more deliberate and be able to really pick out the actual gaps and be able to remedy them to attract the female workforce. My last point, I would say that we are at the point whereby, as stakeholders, we will need to understand that a career guidance, as Grace was mentioning it, could be sort of aligned with early and positive exposure of these young women to the industry. So that linkage, like Mary has good examples she could share, but then it needs to be owned by more Marys and more other men-owned, men-led companies. So that then we get to a point whereby we can measure that effort by and large. So I think I'll stop there. But the main important thing is that us as stakeholders, there must be a touch of intentionality, deliberateness, and smart investment to undo all those gaps.
Thank you, Crispin. I think this is a great round one of questions because we have managed to touch on a whole host of areas, from gender blind regulatory frameworks, lack of women enrolling into STEM training programs, the general sort of social norms around not being able to enter the manufacturing sector, the lack of maybe continuous skilling and training in jobs within the sector. We've touched on the gap between industry and training, and also maybe the lack of role models, which we need to touch on. I'd like to now come back to Hannah to ask you, with all of the sort of the feedback that the other panelists have shared, and at the top of this conversation, you rolled out a whole host of policies and strategies and even programs that the government is implementing. Are there any that are specific for women? You said a lot of our policies and regulatory frameworks are gender blind, but is the government actually intentionally thinking about women in non-traditional sectors, women in manufacturing, and have they rolled out specific interventions to promote skilling or reskilling, upskilling, especially in light of the programs and policies that you mentioned, like the Vision 2030, for which manufacturing is actually one of the key pillars? Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you once again. So my take on that would be that as much as the government may be labeled as doing things as gender blind, there are also things we are doing there are also things the government is doing to target the women. Like, for example, there's that we have been working closely with the TVET institution. So that because we looked at it, yes, we need the degree holders, but there are those people who work on the floor, in the industries, and most of them are skilled in the TVET institution. So there has been that deliberate effort working with the TVET institution to ensure that we have more people who are enrolled. And maybe the step which we need to go further is maybe to actually put specific slots for men and slots for women, so that actually we ensure that as much as we are advertising for them to actually be in the manufacturing and in the industries and be well skilled, so that we ensure we go a step further as we work with TVETA to ensure there are specific slots for women and specific slots for men. We also have, we have a parastatal called KIRDI, Kenya Industry and Research and Development Institute. And we are working on incubation services where they incubate those young graduates. Then they are both gender, male and female. You come with an idea and then you are able to go through the incubation. The incubation, they have the facility, and so you're able to produce a product all from the beginning, and they help you even in the marketing. So these are policies, and these are ways which have been crafted to help even those very young people who are coming from the university. They don't have the funds to put up, so that they can actually find an entry point. We also have the KITI in Nakuru. We call it Kenya Industry and Training Institute. They specifically for skilling. They provide skills in the industry sector. We have the clothing and textiles, we have the engineering, all sectors actually in the diploma and certificate courses. So, and of course, we are looking at the maternity issues, in fact, we are saying the women, not just in the public sector, but even in the private sector, they should be able to go through the maternity days for 90 days and be able to have assurance that they'll get the job back. And also the men go for paternity for 10 days and bond and be able to go back and continue with their work. So these are some of the issues but we're also looking for models, role models. We really need mentors, especially in our ministry, we have very few ladies. Let me just be frank. So we need more. We need more, so that at least even when in those boardrooms, we do not feel intimidated, but actually we stand our ground as women. We do not get intimidated. So we need people who have the skill, so that you're able to stand up and stand up for women, and be counted. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. That's great, and it's good to hear that you're thinking about potential affirmative action, you know, so these slots that can be held for women. I like, because I was going to follow up and ask, what about, you know, the unpaid care work burden that women actually carry, and really thinking about maternity leave, and thinking about how we can make these positions, these opportunities, and these sectors more attractive to women. The idea of incubation is a great one, especially it's good for young people to hear this, because we don't know how many young people are actually aware about these incubation opportunities for businesses and for innovations. So hearing this and having a more, you know, an understanding of these opportunities, I think will be great for young people or even women already in the sector to actually hear about. And you know, the way you touched on that last bit, we need even more women within the trade and industry.
Yeah, we need them in the boardrooms. We need them to make decisions. Yeah.
Yes, I think you have some potential mentors and potential partners here in Grace and others, but it's important, because we should, when we think about diversity and when we think about gender inclusion, it really is across. It's not just in the factories. It should be across the whole ecosystem. So thank you for that. So for Fred, I think a follow-up question on this, and you mentioned statistics where you said, you know, really only a third of the candidates or the applicants into your programs tend to be women. And Nduta, when she was presenting, she talked about where facilities are located, what can be done with training programs to make training programs easier or more applicable or more gender sensitive for women, and even move them to gender transformative. How can we think about, or what mechanisms should be put in place within the training institutes, as well as within the training institutes, to also link the institutes to industry in a way that actually responds to women's needs? So what mechanisms should we be thinking about putting into place? Over to you, Fred.
Okay, thank you, Cleo, again for giving me this opportunity to just say a few words on the mechanisms which the government has put in place. One is that for sure, you know that the government has spread technical training institutions to almost every corner of this country. You know that every constituency is supposed to have a technical training institute, and part of these departments that are in these institutions lead to STEM programs. Of course, a few of them, of course, may not directly lead to manufacturing, but we have taken most of the institutions close to where the people are. So therefore, in terms of women, we know they will not travel long distances, probably. They may not be able to leave home. They can walk from home to the institution, do the training. If the issue of childcare and what have you, it could be maybe to close proximity in that respect, unless you want to do a course that is far away from where that institution is. Two is that we, as I have said, is that now we have moved on to competence-based education and training, where we need the industry to play a part in development of occupational standards that will lead to what is required. And probably as they do that, they can mainstream gender issues into the curriculum development in that process. The other part, number three, is the issue of bursary. We realize that probably the families will prefer to take the boy child to a training institution and leave the female child. But now, if we offer bursary, that means that the students have an opportunity to apply to Higher Education Loans Board to get a loan. Two is the government also gives capitation to students that will get that once you are admitted through the Kenya universities and colleges placement service. Three is that we are equipping institutions with the state-of-the-art training equipment that they will be able to respond to the industry needs. Now, the other issue is the issue of using role models, which has been emphasized here very critically. Just want to give you a clear example. When we were doing this course on industrial mechatronics technology in Kiambu Institute of Technology. This lady from Coca-Cola went around to sensitize ladies to enroll. And when you look at that enrollment, the first one, you find that there are 8 ladies out of 21 total enrollment. That's about 38%, which means that role modeling is very key in attracting or in asking ladies to join so that we can demystify the issue of the difficultness or the laborious nature of the STEM programs or the issues of manufacturing for ladies. That is very key so that we get a lady to demystify. It's like these ones who do plant operators. They give us very good example. The other one is the issue of advocacy. Of course, advocacy is key, and we start this one at secondary schools, at primary schools for our girls to be able to take note and do well in STEM courses in that respect. And the last one, of course, is the issue of affirmative action, which we have to entrench in our policies. How it is something that we need to think about. Now, if you look at the issue of the ratios of 1 engineer, we require 3 technologists, we require 12 technicians and 60 craftsmen. Now, the problem with this country is that we have been more emphasizing on the engineers than the other people who are supervisors on the floor. And this is where the problem is. We have to invert this triangle so that we train more of these people. And the moment we start with those low levels, then there is a provision of them growing up in the ladder until they reach the engineer level. Once they grow that, because we have a provision of recognition of prior learning for those who have, like what Mary has said, people who have already been exposed to the aspect of manufacturing. They may not have the certificate, but we can certificate them because now they have the skill. We corresponded with the curricula and they can grow up the ladder. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. This is important. The idea, bursaries and taking the training to centers and institutions that are accessible, and like you say, it's very important because even as we think about bringing more women and encouraging more women into these fields, we need to be thinking about it at all levels. We can't be training all the women to be engineers, like you have said. So I think that's very important. The idea of bursaries will also go a long way in also perhaps, reducing, the burden on families when you're thinking about training which subjects or which area to train your potential students in. So touching on that, and I'd like to ask Mary. There is the issue around the pipeline, which Fred has actually talked about. We need a larger pipeline, and we need to have women at all levels. And something that has been mentioned in the chat as we've been monitoring the discussions on the chat is that even if there are women working within the industry, they will be in the administrative roles, maybe in finance or HR or admin, rather than actually being on the floor and maybe or even in the more technical positions. So what do manufacturers and Crispin did sort of touch on it when he said we need to invest. So what do manufacturers need to do, to deliberately do, to diversify the skill sets of their workforce and diversify their workforce? Because if the only women you're seeing in the company are in admin or finance, you really will not see a place for yourself on the floor. So what do manufacturers, what steps have they taken, or what do they need to deliberately do to diversify their workforce? Over to you, Mary.
Thank you. I think as manufacturers also, we are concerned about this and we have made enough noise. This is why some of these policies are being included to take care of the women. And I think also as manufacturers is the same reason why we are creating a women-focused association like Women in Manufacturing, so that we are able to network and collectively raise our voices of challenges. And at the farm level, as manufacturers, we should be intentional in being specific to give women the technical roles that are jobs that we have. We have to be intentional. We have to be intentional that it is not only administrative role that we're gonna give the ladies, and we give them technical role. We have also talked about on-job training. We can train them. Fred has talked about prior learning certification. We can also embrace that so that we're able to also grow them above or along the radar with certification, and we're able to take them to the next levels. The other thing that I would also say as manufacturer, for ease of women getting into manufacturing, we normally do a lot of exhibition. Like also Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we have a lot of exhibition for products and machinery, simply just to be able to expose to the women of the technology and what is required to demystify this manufacturing issue that we are talking about. We have mentorship programs that we have been running also across the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We have women who have come up as role model, and this is what Fred is talking about. We have also created programs like subcontracting, where we are connecting the small SMEs across the value chain so that they can also be able to interact with the big manufacturers, and they are able also to supply the big manufacturing entities. We create trade missions, again, for exposure, because without exposure, some of these things are so far-fetched, and we shy away from them because of the cultural stereotype that we have. So to break the cultural stereotype, I think we are pushing women to be visible through these associations that we are saying, to make them grow. We are creating collaborations like what I've talked about, the subcontracting, and also for scaling up now as manufacturers, we are pushing what we are calling the contract manufacturing. So that if you do not have the resources for machinery, if you do not understand the technology, you're able to align yourself with a bigger entity to learn how to operate and how to scale up with through contract manufacturing, or also to have consistency in your product in the market with consistency. There's another speaker who talked about Kiarie. After the government has done the incubation, you need to scale up. So as manufacturers, we are coming out and we are putting environment where we can be able to grow our industries in the manufacturing. But all said is that manufacturers, we need to be intentional in how it is that we grow our women who are working for us, not just on the administration job, but on technical area. So there's need for the industry or association or the government to maybe give incentives and monitor the intentionality of organizations that are embracing gender equality.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. I think those are all key points. And now moving on from that now to Grace, and because of your expertise and experience, not only in training, but as an engineer, what are you seeing as the return on investment if we bridge this gender gap in skill set development? What do you see will be what do you think will be the outcomes? Thank you, Grace.
Thank you very much. I first want to talk from a point of the statistics that Sarah gave. Mm-hmm. And in 2018, from one of her slides, I think formal employment in manufacturing for women was 16%, and it only grew by 1% in 2019. What does that tell you? It tells you that there is a huge pool of untapped talent. Women who have the skill sets that are required in manufacturing. Now, I think there are barriers that need to be broken. She touched on patriarchy. Fred touched on enrollment, the lack of role models, because there has to be deliberate effort to be able to tap into that pool of untapped talent and skill set. Because one, gender diversity, in my opinion, improves innovation or promotes innovation, the creativity that women bring to the table. Being an engineer, and I'm an electrical engineer, for example, I would design maybe a lighting system. I'd probably not only just look at the technical requirements, but I'd also look at the aesthetics, which is something different from perhaps what my male counterparts would bring to the table. And so in my opinion, gender diversity improves innovation. And with improved innovation, of course, profitability goes up. What Mary is talking about, the kind of exposure they have, it means more business comes in. A different voice on the table can also bring more persuasion to other businesses to be able to invest. Sarah's slides, she had a slide on gender inclusion and diversity and on return on investment. In one of those slides, she said 20% more likely if you have more women, more likely to have enhanced business outcomes, and 9% more likely to have improved business performance. I have seen even in the engineering consulting firms that are being run by women, the kind of business they pull in specifically because there's just that bit of diversity. Of course, they work with the men, but just that bit of diversity, it pulls in quite a bit of return on investment, because you find that more clients would trust the woman on board. The fact that, and I'm speaking from experience, because a lot of the teams I've worked in the consulting sector, more often than not, in a project team of 10, you're the only lady. And sometimes the client would pull you aside just to get you to affirm what the other gentlemen are talking about. So we need to tap that critical talent pool and make sure that we're bringing in diversity, which improves creativity, improves innovation, better designs for this and that. And of course, that is going to drive profitability. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. It's interesting, gender dynamics everywhere. How you've mentioned a woman being pulled aside so that they can affirm to the client, what the rest of the team may have said. There is a benefit to having gender diversity. So over to you, Crispin. In light of everything that has been discussed here, how can the manufacturing sector players actually manage these transitions and skilling and upskilling in this era of automation? What more can be done, and what do you see through a gender lens?
Thank you so much, Cleo. I like the discussion, the way it's flowing. And when I look at the question you've just asked on automation, I would want to look at it as women, automation, or artificial intelligence technologies and the future of work. And then I ask myself, will automation improve or increase the opportunities for the female workforce in manufacturing? And so this takes us then back to the stakeholders or managers within the manufacturing sector to ask ourselves, for example, what will be the danger of automation in terms of displacement? And this takes us back to look at when we transition from agriculture to manufacturing 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and now we are talking about manufacturing 4.0, which is actually automation. We would want to critically evaluate and see whether there have been a drop, for example, of female workforce within the pipeline, whether there is likely to be an increase. But now, what can we do? Number one, on what we can be able to do is to appreciate that the future of work definitely signifies this shift to adaptation of advanced technologies and approaches to production. But also looking at the Kenyan manufacturing sector, the rate at which it's automating, if it is, and if they see the possibility of automation, then we will need to put what we're saying, deliberate effort to tap the full potential that is with the female workforce, and then that talent pool, just as Engineer Grace has already alluded to, so that concerted and creative effort is put in order to ensure that the oncoming or the onset of automation does not become a danger, but then open up opportunities for female workforce to engage. Now, for them to do so, then what we have to do is to see how then do we ensure that the women who lag behind in tech actually have access to tech, have access to the right skills, and to be able to use it, and also to apply it in the manufacturing sector. And of course, as we had earlier asked, which of these subsectors of manufacturing have more women, and are they the ones that are automating? So those critical questions will help us get the right solution for the managers to manage transition, to be able to put in place the right sort of investment in the right skills. And also for those that are already in the industry, will be able then to be trained as to how to advance that and upskill. Mary is here, and Mary normally has a lot of machineries in our factories, the 3 factories. And she could tell you that, of course, she has women at different levels of operations. But then if we were to fully automate, what would be the place of the female workforce that you have? The last thing I would want to say is, Fred mentioned about industrial mechatronics, and of course, whereby we have 8 out of 21 being female. And then, of course, you have statistics that out of 1 engineer, you need 3 technicians and all the way to 60 groundsmen. Now, then how in the era of automation as well, how do we ensure that then there's a clear understanding of the new technologies and developing the right skill sets around the various needs of the manufacturing sector? So simply put, I want to say that technology can break down many of the barriers that women face in manufacturing, but also open new economic opportunities, which will help them in terms of participating in the workforce in the automation age, and also enabling them even to navigate in the transition. So it's us to actually look at the opportunity, look at the female workforce, and prepare them to grab those opportunities moving forward.
Thank you, Crispin. I'd like to thank all our panelists for these insights that they gave us. And I'm now going to pose one final question to each of our panelists, because through this discussion that we've had, a lot of the questions that were raised by our audience have been answered. So I'm going to ask each of you to just respond to this final question very briefly. And the question is, from what you know, what you're experiencing, and the work that you do, as well as the conversation that we've had here, what would be your key recommendation, your one key recommendation for the attainment of a skilled and gender inclusive workforce in manufacturing? So I'll start with you, Hannah. What is your key recommendation?
Thank you. I think my key recommendation, I want to start from a very young age. Because sometimes you lose these children when we do not, because you need to treat the 2 genders the same. And when you orient them, that they are all capable, they are all able, in all ways they are the same. To me, I tell them the only difference, their anatomy, it's an anatomy, but gender, brain-wise. So when a child is oriented from a very young age and able to get mentors, I think we will be able to get women to get into these so-called STEM, which have previously been dominated only by men. We need the women to mentor them, even as they grow up, the children, both female and male, so that we also don't lose the boys as we are trying to get the girls, both of them.
Thank you, Hannah. Fred, what would be your key recommendation?
Okay, yes, my key recommendation will be, and I already talked about it, advocacy is key, so that we are able to change the attitude of both genders, and also for parents, because parents, we play a very key role. Sometimes we keep on discouraging or encouraging our children on what to do and on what not to do. For example, you can say if you get a child who is left-handed, and in African culture, we may think that is a bad omen. We want to tell that child to start using the right hand. It's the same that happens with these STEM programs, and also these programs that lead to manufacturing or any other. So advocacy to change attitude for both the children and the parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Mary, what's your key recommendation?
I think my key recommendation would be like, we need to encourage and develop our industries. We need to mechanize them and automate our industry. When we mechanize and we automate our industry, then we make it easier for women in STEM to be able to operate, and we create a good environment for our working technical skills. We also need to not look at automation as a threat, because when we automate, we create more jobs. What we need to do is to think how it is then that we can be able to be developing and manufacturing those automating machinery locally here. We see it as a threat because we are importing the automation machinery, but if we manufacture those machinery for automation here, then there will be a job loss in the operation, but there will be job creation in the need of making those machineries that we need to automate our industries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Grace, what's your key recommendation?
I think that we need to empower women through recognition, one, through research and leadership. I'm happy with the work that ICRW is doing. And then also to encourage them, as Mary is saying, to engage their skills in modern manufacturing, because that brings them to a level playing field. But even as we are doing that, we also need to encourage them to pay it forward in terms of mentorship of the upcoming generation. It's the only way, as Hannah is saying, start them young, but start them with the right people who can shape, their mindsets towards opportunities in manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Crispin, what's your key recommendation?
My key recommendation is intentional gender smart investment in bridging the skills gap.
Thank you. That was very quick, Crispin. Nduta, we haven't seen you on screen other than when you presented the data. I'd like to ask, what is your key recommendation?
Thank you, Cleo. I've been around. I think for me, within the business front, we need to be deliberate in skilling, in reskilling, and in upskilling. So the way I see it is that employee education and training is an ongoing process. So it doesn't mean that if you are an engineer and that's it. So with the ever-changing business and the technological innovations and requirements, we need to keep upgrading. And what is important is how we ensure that women are not left behind in these endeavors. So in a nutshell, how companies or business entities support their staff to take advantage of existing learning opportunities is very important. And it means that we really need to inculcate this into our business culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Nduta. And as I said, a lot of the questions that had been posed by our audience were answered during the discussion. So we actually will not have a separate question and answer session. This panel discussion was so rich. So I would just like to I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank Hannah, Mary, Grace, Fred, Crispin, and Nduta for being part of this discussion. Thank you all for your time and expertise. Your insights will go a long way in shaping how policies, strategies, and programs on skill set development within our training institutions and our workplaces are actually planned and are delivered. And all of this will hopefully enable more inclusion and diversity in the manufacturing workforce. I'd like to thank all our attendees, our audience, for your participation and your active engagement. And just to remind everyone that this was the first of a two-part webinar series. The second webinar is going to be held on Tuesday, 6th July, and we do welcome you to join us as we wrap up this discussion on skill set development. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar to everybody who registered for this, even if you were not able to attend the session today. So please look out for it in the next few days. Again, to our speakers, our presenter, thank you. To the team behind the scenes who is helping run this webinar, thank you. From ICRW, and on behalf of all the speakers, I say thank you. Have a good evening, a good afternoon, wherever you are, and we look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye.